It's the new year, guys! Woo! So wishing all of you a very happy new year, and I hope 2022 has been treating you guys well. So Chinese New Year is actually coming up soon, and I'm hoping to film this video so that you guys can understand a bit more about the different types of board games during your last minute CNY purchases, especially when you guys are gonna go for your house visitations as well. So actually, based on today's date, it's just 2 days away from Chinese New Year, so crossing my fingers that I can release this video in time. So one of the other reasons why I wanted to film this video is because during one of my recent trips to the shopping mall, I saw that Monopoly Singapore Edition was being promoted as something you can get during Chinese New Year. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I guess this is the reason why most people think that board games are only either Monopoly or Game of Life or even Uno, because there's so many variations of those games, and those games usually just hop onto various trends. So maybe if a Star Wars movie is being released, they will release Monopoly Star Wars. So because there's so many variations and so many themes, consumers will most likely buy it, and this is why these are kind of like the top of mind board games that you have. But the thing about this game is that this is still the same game, and there's actually so many other board games out there that can be as fun or even more fun than Monopoly itself. And hopefully this can help you with your purchases, not only for Chinese New Year, but whenever you're actually going to be picking up a board game to play with your friends. So let's get to the video. But before that, I just wanted to quickly share, since this is a new year, I'm actually having a new setup right here. So I have my ring light over here, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't wear my spectacles, because you can see the reflections during filming. Yeah, so just wanted to share this update very quickly with you guys. But yeah, let's get to the video. Look at one of the more common game categories that we have, which are party games. So right here I actually have a few party games myself, and I think some of the titles might be quite familiar with some of you guys, as you might have played it with some of your friends before. So as you can see from the boxes here, these games are actually very small in size and very portable. The game components of party games are also usually not too much, so it's actually fairly portable and you can play this game anywhere, as long as you can fit these games inside your bag. But of course, sometimes there might be some exceptions. So for instance, games like Betrayal and House of the Hill. So if you compare the boxes, of course Betrayal has a bigger box and there's more components that's inside. Personally, I would still consider this somewhat like a party game, but I'll explain more about this afterwards. So more common party games like this are usually quite inexpensive. So these games actually only cost me about $20 to $30 each. So you can actually pick one of these games up very easily. And the thing about party games is that the rules are relatively fast paced and also very easy to understand and learn. So it's fairly easy for you to introduce games like this to some of your friends who may not have as much experience playing board games like this. But of course, the party game category is actually a very generic term, so as long as the rules and the components are fairly easy to learn and the game can accommodate a larger group of people, I would consider it a party game myself. So if you're looking for an inexpensive game with easy to play rules, and you're also a beginner in the whole board game scene, I would strongly recommend you to start off with a party game first, just so you can kind of dip your feet into what board games is all about, which is also how I actually started out as well. Okay, so next up are the big tabletop games. So some examples of these are games like this. So I think you get the point, right? Essentially, tabletop games require you to have a tabletop because of how large the games are and the number of components that's inside. So usually tabletop games will have certain themes and adventures that you can go on. So maybe one day you can be uncovering the missing villagers and exploring a dungeon only to find yourself fighting off some monsters with your flame-imbued sword and casting magical spells with your teammates. So I wouldn't really particularly recommend this game for people who are actually starting out the board games, because there's a very steep learning curve to actually learn the rules and also the various combat system or skill system of the game itself. But honestly, I feel that what really shines in this game is that even though the duration of the game is long, players will be able to immerse themselves into a different world and taking on different characters that they can create themselves. So if you are familiar with D&D, that's the category of the games that we're talking about here. But one thing about this game is that you need to invest in terms of your time and in terms of your money as well. So these games are usually about 100, and the rules also need some time for you to kind of learn them. So one tip from me is that if you are looking to purchase an adventure game, do your own research first. Try to browse YouTube and have an overview of how the gameplay looks like to see if this is something that you will like before picking up the game. So back to the point, if you are looking for a game where you can really immerse yourself into a fantasy world, I would strongly recommend you to try out some tabletop games. So the third category of games that I want to introduce to you guys is actually not very commonly known, and it's called EuroGames. So this category of games actually comes by many other names. So it can also be known as German board games, worker placement games, and economics game. And the thing about this game is that it's different from its westernized counterparts, where there's more conflict and luck and competition. But for EuroGames, there's actually lesser player engagements, and the rules of EuroGames are usually point systems, where players would build their own developments and try to attain the most points as possible. So I don't own any EuroGames at the moment, but some of the more common games that you would have heard of would be Settlers of Catan, where you actually trade and exchange resources to try and build your own settlements and gain the most points. And I would say this is actually one of the grandfather of board games, which actually brought this whole EuroGames concept to more modern games. One example would be Wingspan, where you need to collect as many birds and lay as many eggs to accumulate the most points to win the game. So personally, I feel that EuroGames are quite therapeutic because these games are fairly slower paced, and you usually work by yourself to try and build up your own developments progressively. So if you're actually looking to pick up a game that's a bit more slower paced, with lesser competition involved, or maybe even to pick up a game just to play solo yourself, I would recommend you to look at board games in the EuroGame categories. So the last category that I would like to introduce to you guys for this video would be the abstract strategy category. So essentially this is kind of like my catch-all category. So if it doesn't fit into the first three categories, I will kind of deem them as an abstract strategy game. So this would include games like chess, where the games itself are kind of like brain teasers or something that involves a bit of thinking and strategizing. So for abstract strategy games, there's usually no particular theme to the game, with simplistic rules but also requiring a lot of strategic thinking. So pick up games in this category if you like to work on brain teasers or logical puzzles. Some recommendations from the top of my head would be games like Azul, where you need to create different combinations of the same colored gems, or maybe even get chess yourself. I think that is one of the most simple yet most fun games that you can have and learn because of the different combination and strategies that you can try for the game. But of course, what I've shared earlier is just the tip of the iceberg. There's actually so many other categories that are out there, especially when so many new games are being released every year, means that there might be even categories that I might not even know about. Some of these games even have multiple categories that mixes with each other. That said, I feel that you shouldn't be considering too much into the categories or the type of the game, but if you find that a board game is really interesting, my recommendation is just to pick it up and play it. Anyway, you don't just solely need to own one board game. You can even resell this game on Carousel so that other players can try on this game as well. So let me know down in the comment section what game you are picking up. I'll be keen to know as well. But of course, wishing you guys a very happy Chinese New Year again, and I'm not sure why I put my arms this way. And see you in the next video. Bye!